Have you seen Saz?
I was gonna ask you the same thing. She was supposed to double me on this pilot we shot last week, but she never showed.
That's not like her.
We start off by getting reminded our favorite stunt person Zaz needs to speak to Charles about something, but ends up getting capped in Charles' apartment while looking for some wine. As our crew is waiting, they go ahead and record and drop the latest episode of their podcast, and the power goes out, but it comes back. They make it to grab the wine, but we see Zaz's body is not there anymore, and no one notices the bullet hole in the glass. Charles wakes up and still hasn't heard from Zaz and hears a whistling sound. Oliver is frazzled because his show is canceled after mid-reviews and pulled funding. Howard shows off his new pup, and the crew gets some good news and gets invited to Hollywood to meet with Paramount so they can make a movie about our crew's adventures. Charles hears from Zaz and the crew heads off to Old Hollywood. They meet with some fancy execs and we meet some potential suspects and find out the offer to make the movie is real. Mabel's not sure she's about that life and just wants some time to think about the offer. Charles takes the crew on a field trip to lift up their spirits and they stop by to check in on Zaz, but no one's home. They head off to a meet and greet party and meet the actors who will be portraying them in the movie about their life. The crew gets to know their actor counterparts a little bit more and Loretta stops by to visit Oliver. Eva Longoria tries to convince Mabel to sign the deal for the movie and Charles thinks he found Zaz. Loretta tries to convince Oliver to move to LA and Mabel is finally ready to make a deal with the movie execs. Charles approaches Zaz but find out it's not Zaz. Instead, it's his more famous indirect nemesis, Scott Bakula, an actor whose name we've heard before throughout various seasons of the show. Charles asks Scott if he's seen Zaz and Scott says that she never showed up to double him for his show the previous week. Things seem fishy to our group, so they break into Zaz's place and do some digging. They see her x-rays as art and Charles says she only gets replacement joints from Bulgaria. They find a bunch of loose notes on her desk and Charles gets a call from Lester informing him he got Charles' note and will change out the window tomorrow. Charles says he didn't send the note and Mabel finds out Howard's dog is a cadaver dog, which is why he was barking in Charles' place. They fly back to New York and let the dog do his work. He leads them to the incinerator and after digging in the ashes, Charles finds metal joint replacements from Bulgaria matching the kind that Zaz had. They get a mean text from Zaz's phone and the crew realizes they have another case to solve.
Whoever is in that place with the lockbox on it, who lives there?
Oh, that's the Dudenoff place.
Do you know how we could contact them?
No, I don't think you'll be
They've been out of town.
The episode starts off with old school footage of Zaz doing an interview and Charles grieving over her loss. He attempts to find a very creative way to store her remains left over in his hands and jacket. He then sees an imaginary version of her pop up and have a chat with him. Oliver and Mabel are attempting to recreate the shot that would have killed Zaz and track where the shot may have come from. Charles wants to call the cops about Zaz being killed, but Oliver and Mabel want Charles to just wait a little bit so they can continue sleuthing before the police are involved. Imaginary Zaz keeps popping up and the crew decides to order some luminol and make a clue board. They also deduce Charles was the intended target and go over the notes of clues they took from Zaz's place. The crew then decides to go over what they know about the people living in the West Tower. We're given a list of possible new suspects from the West Tower that Charles is able to see from his window. Oliver and Mabel head out to investigate the 14th floor of the West Tower. Charles watches the old documentary we saw a clip of at the beginning of the episode and has a chat with Zaz, makes a clue board, and hears a noise in his closet. He goes to investigate and we see the return of Jan. Oliver and Mabel go meet eye patch Joe and investigate what kind of vantage point he has and finds out the windows on the west side are painted shut. Joe invites Ollie and Mabel to play Oh Hell at the neighbors and they decide to go. Jan tells Charles she broke out of prison and amidst Charles' concerns, she tells him she broke out because she's worried about Zaz. She also wants to know why he called the cops. We return back to Oliver and Mabel and meet the Sauce family. We meet Inez, Alfonso, and their daughter Anna and learn the mom Inez has a big crush on Charles. Oliver and Mabel get into playing Oh Hell while trying to figure out the rules, and we also see something weird is going down in the bathroom involving a knife that's a Westie secret. Jan and Charles reflect on their love for Zaz, and Charles mentions his shared phrase, tap in, that he used to tell Zaz to stand in for him. Oliver achieves a no hell and gets invited to take a trip to the bathroom with a knife. Oliver finds a ham or jamon, which is a rare cut of meat the family imported from Portugal. Mabel asks about the one apartment she saw a key lock on. Anna tells her it's the Dudenoff place, and then everyone gets real weird when Mabel asks to get in contact with them. Jan says Zaz told her Charles might be in trouble and mentions you only get rid of a body if you killed the wrong person, and don't want people to know about it, and insinuates more danger is to come. She flees when Ollie and Mabel arrive back to Charles' place. They fill Charles in on everything they saw, and Charles tries to tell them that Jan was there, but they don't believe him. Oliver and Mabel think they found a keypad combination on the clue board and go back to see if it works. They're able to get in and find more clues, including a radio, a footprint, paint chips, tinsel, and a baby pig. They hear someone attempting to come in, but because the door is double locked, whoever's at the door is stuck outside. They eventually look out of the hallway to find out who it was, but see no one and instead hear a door close and the pig escapes. Back in the East Tower, Charles is almost too paranoid to leave his apartment to go get the luminol that arrived. He puts on his version of a disguise and attempts to leave, but SWAT breaks in to look for Jan, who they think broke out to hurt him. He says that Jan was there, and his call to the cops finally gets through, and he reports Saz's murder. The crew gets ready to use the luminol while the cops are searching in the incinerator, but Charles needs a moment before they do that. He reflects with imaginary Saz over their misadventures from early in their friendship together. The crew finally luminols the floor, and we see where Saz's body was, and also see one last message she left with her blood. Our crew looks out the window and sees the West Side crew gathered in the Dudenoff apartment staring right back at them. Oliver accidentally discovers that the key code for the door isn't just a numerical code, it's the word "oh hell" upside down, which points the finger even harder to someone from the West Tower being involved in Saz's murder.
Are you drinking at 10 in the morning?
Yeah, I'm getting into character.
I don't drink at 10 in the morning.
No, my Mabel does.
We start off our episode with Zach Galifianakis narrating as we see our clue board coming together. Detective Williams pays our crew a visit and drops a bunch of clues in their lap and says the FBI is now covering the case. Williams then becomes starstruck as she sees the celebrities shadowing our crew. Eva Longoria informs our group that the brother-sisters thought it would be a good idea for the actors to hang with their counterparts for a day to do some character study. We find out Williams has a crush on Zach Galifianakis, and our OG crew, after much debate, decides they will let the actors shadow them. Mabel and Eva get off to a weird start, and the whole crew, including the actors, goes over the evidence they have to narrow down the suspects. They narrow down the top two suspects as Pink-Eyed Joe and Rudy the Christmas guy. Oliver decides they should split up and investigate each suspect while he trains Zach in his ways. Charles and Eugene are assigned to investigate Pink-Eyed Joe and come up with a game plan to check out if his eye is bruised because he may be the shooter. Mabel and Eva game plan on how to approach Rudy, and Eva wants to change Mabel's name to Mabel. Oliver tries to be better friends with Zach and show him his ways, and then decides to have Howard monitor the ham radio they found in the Dudenoff place while he shows Zach how to be him. Mabel goes to Rudy's only to find Eva is there first, investigating. Charles and Eugene approach Pink-Eyed Joe and try to con him into taking off his eye patch by trying their fake eye drops. They improv a very cringy story about Charles' cousin inventing these eye drops that are made from a rare plant from Paraguay. Pink-Eyed Joe is done with the cringiness and decides to try the drops in a different room, thus thwarting the entire plan. Rudy gives Mabel and Eva some protein eggnog, and Eva blabbers that they're there looking for clues. Mabel is looking to see if Rudy has tinsel in his decorations, but finds out Rudy owns a ham radio as the Perfect Strangers theme plays through it. Rudy goes to put the radio away, and Mabel sees he also has a gun. Oliver gets deep with Zach and admits he just wants the film of his life to be the best it can be. He begins to give Zach an Oliver makeover and tells him the secret to his great stories. We go through a montage of Oliver shaping Zach into a spitting image of him with the theme of Perfect Strangers playing in the background. Charles and Eugene decide to go with Eugene's first plan to do a spit take after a joke and get the eye patch wet, so Pink-Eyed Joe has to take it off. After awkwardly debating, Eugene has decided to be the spitter, and Charles proceeds to tell a joke. As Charles gets one line into the joke, Eugene spits and gets punched by Joe. They ultimately find out that Pink-Eyed Joe got some pink on that eye. Mabel is searching for tinsel in Rudy's apartment and is almost caught. Eva finds out she has a dinner to attend early and wants to incite Rudy into admitting he's the killer by destroying his Christmas decor. She also grabs his rifle and threatens him to confess at gunpoint. She shoots and finds out the gun's not real, and Rudy admits he hates Christmas and just does it for his social media following. He asks Mabel and Eva not to tell anybody, and Mabel asks what he knows about the tinsel that was found at the crime scene. Rudy tests it and says it's not tinsel, and Mabel apologizes for Eva's antics. Oliver and Zach return after a long day of hanging, and Howard says he took a lot of notes from the stuff he heard on the ham radio, including the theme to Perfect Strangers. Oliver and Howard overhear Zach on the phone with his agent bad-mouthing Oliver. Howard approaches Zach as he tries to leave and lays all the pretty and ugly reasons why he admires Oliver. Zach finally sees the angle he was looking for to play Oliver and vows to play Oliver as best as he can. Charles and Eugene apologize to Joe for the charade, and Charles and Joe clear up their weirdness toward each other by hugging it out. Eugene gets in on the action and points out a new clue to Charles. Mabel decides to part ways with Eva and snoop around the crime scene apartment. Mabel decides she's going to be a squatter in the abandoned place and invites Charles over for a housewarming party. The crew hangs at Mabel's new spot, and Mabel starts singing the theme for Perfect Strangers, and Oliver joins along. Charles wonders why they're singing it, and Mabel says she heard it on Rudy's ham radio. Oliver remembers Howard saying he also heard it on the ham radio he was monitoring, along with a message to meet at 4:45. Oliver determines it's a frequency station, and they tune their radio to that channel. Mabel radios out to the channel to find out who it is. Someone replies back and informs the crew they shouldn't be on the frequency, and also seems familiar with the pig. The voice tells the crew the last person asking questions died, and if they don't stop digging, they'll be next.
That's an addition to the 5.
Think of all the tattoos you can finish with that.
Oh,
This episode starts off with Charles having a dream where he's following Saz, who tells him they're going to paradise. Charles gathers the crew and builds a murder board just for Saz. Charles is trying to find all the points that connect him and Saz together and what her connection is to the West Tower. Mabel says the people in the West Tower won't talk to her since she's been squatting. Oliver says he's tired and feeling insecure about his relationship with Loretta after seeing a picture on her Instagram with a male arm around her. Mabel finds out Saz used to follow Loretta on Insta, and the last picture she took was at a place called Concussions the day she died. The crew finds out it's a bar and plans to investigate. Mabel thanks Howard for watching the pig, and Howard says he would like Mabel's help on his podcast, Animal Jobs. Mabel says she can't right now and needs him to keep holding down the fort while she goes off to investigate, and Howard is less than excited about that. The trio investigates the bar, and after their cover is blown, the crew admits they're there to just ask questions about Saz. After Charles botches a bribe to the bartender, the stuntman patrons approach the crew and let them know they aren't welcome there. Next, after some commotion, we see Ben Glenroy. No, that's just his stunt double Glenn Stubbins, who is angry and sad about Ben's death and also might be on crack because he's stomping imaginary rats. The crew see a room in the back with the same light that was in Saz's pig, but they're forced out by Glenn. He chases the crew outside and lets them know he was just putting up a front and asks for a role in their movie. They promise to get him a job on the movie if he just tells them what's happening in the back. Glenn lets them know that a chiropractor named Dr. Maggie works there, and that's who Saz was probably visiting with. Charles volunteers as tribute and decides to stay back and speak with Maggie. Howard is hanging with Hammy Faye and hears footsteps at the door and finds a note slid under the door inviting people to audition for the movie. Against better judgment, he leaves and auditions to play himself. The brother-sisters are confused about what's happening, and Howard finds out he's not the next American Idol. Glenn introduces Charles to Maggie, who only agrees to answer questions once Charles lays down for a cracking. Mabel is wondering where Dudenoff is, and Oliver is worried about what he should say to Loretta on his fake Instagram account. Oliver vents to Mabel about his insecurities and losing Loretta, and Howard comes back to break off his friendship with Mabel, but Mabel realizes Howard is here, and that means no one is watching the Dudenoff place. Maggie starts talking to Charles, and he finds out Saz was in a lot of pain and she was getting ready to retire. Charles also finds out Saz was in a difficult relationship and she was looking to get away. Charles has an out-of-body moment during his cracking and thinks the bad relationship Saz was talking about was him. Mabel gets back to the Dudenoff place only to find out the Westies are moving her bed. They ask her not to call the cops and explain they're just helping run a renter scam to keep their rent prices low. We find out Dudenoff has rented the entire floor and also find out it was indeed Helga who threatened our crew over the ham radio. The Westies offer to let Mabel stay for the same low price they pay if she doesn't blow the lid on the operation. Mabel explains the situation to Charles and Oliver, and the crew each reflect on the problems each one is going through. Mabel tells Oliver he needs to delete his fake account before Loretta finds out, and Charles has a plan to help honor Saz's memory. He offers his body in place of Saz's so the stunt crew can say their goodbyes in their own traditional way. They kick off the fake eulogy, and a few of Saz's stunt friends say a short story about her and crack a fake glass bottle on Charles's head. Glenn tells his own story about Saz and hits Charles with a real bottle that doesn't break and gives him a concussion. This causes a fight to break out in the bar, and Charles has a flashback about Saz telling him about how she wants to open up a trampoline park for kids. Charles awakens and the crew goes off to visit the site where Saz wanted to make her park at. As they check out the property, they hear a noise coming from the storage shed. As they investigate, they find Bev Mellon in the shed with a gun, and she threatens to blow their brains out if they move.
Bev, did you kill her?
No, I did not. But I think someone on the movie may have.
We begin the episode with Marshall narrating and us getting a glimpse into his life wearing a fake beard and glasses. We see his journey to getting his script greenlit. Back at the shack, the crew faces an armed Bev Mellon. Bev realizes who she was aiming at and calms down. She thinks the gun is not loaded, but she thought wrong. The crew takes the gun from her and asks her why she's there and if she killed Saz. She says she didn't kill Saz but thinks someone in the movie crew might have. They ask where Bev was the night Saz was murdered, and she says she was at a party in LA. She also says she got a voicemail from Saz, and Mabel notices it came in at 11:07. The crew gets the gun back to Williams, and they try to let her know about the latest info they know. After the crew gets their movie checks, Mabel struggles with her identity as a podcast producer. The crew decides to look for more suspects upstairs at the production office apartment. They go upstairs and get invited to do a photo shoot later on with the rest of the actors. Bev Mellon teases Oliver about Loretta's new jonky co-star, and Charles and Mabel find out there's tacky mat on the ground to keep the dust out of the work area. And oh yeah, Howard is an assistant on the set. Mabel and Charles sneak around the set, and Charles uses an obvious phone bit to take photos of the crew and the work area. As they look around the room for suspects, they see Marshall is a bit nervous. The crew asks to speak with Marshall, and he's relieved when he finds out it's about the case and not about the movie. Charles and Oliver take Marshall upstairs, and Bev intercepts Mabel and approaches her about other podcast ideas she might have. Glenn drops off a gift to Charles, and the crew gets to work on interrogating Marshall. Charles starts by complimenting the script, while Oliver is not too happy with how he was written. Marshall informs the group the night Saz died, he was in LA doing a comedy set. Mabel asks Marshall if he's wearing a fake beard, and Marshall admits he is. He also admits to wearing fake glasses even though he has 20/10 vision. He admits to having imposter syndrome and praises the podcast group for all the work they do and for inspiring him. Charles offers to go over the murder board and all the information they have so far. Marshall has a question about the timing of Saz's last call compared to when the incinerator power surge happened. He questions if 12 minutes was really enough time for one person to commit the crime. Charles says he can break down how the crime happened in 12 minutes. He then proceeds to go through an exaggerated imaginary theatrical version of how the crime could have played out. Marshall still has questions about the timeline and insinuates that someone in good shape would have to do it. Oliver, trying to prove that he's more athletic than Loretta's co-star, volunteers to do the 12-minute reenactment. He starts off okay, only to be interrupted by John McEnroe. Oliver completes the trek in 38 minutes and seems slightly frustrated for not finishing in under 12. Mabel says they have to get ready to go to the photo shoot because one of the photos of the footprints from the tacky mat matches the footprint they found in the Dudenoff apartment. They go to the photo shoot and become overwhelmed by the double-double versions of themselves. The crew takes a few photos and with the assistance of Howard and Eva create a plan to lay out tacky mats to track the footprint once again. Oliver is called to take more photos in odd poses and Charles figures out there would have to be 2 people involved in the murders. Charles tells Mabel the 2-man theory and they scan the room for suspects. Mabel sees the footprint she's been looking for and it seemingly matches Tawny Brothers' shoes. Mabel is now convinced it was the brother-sisters who could have pulled off the attack. As they look back, Tawny Brother is missing on the set and we hear a gunshot with a fade to black and Howard saying, "Oh my God, they've been shot."
Listen guys, don't all be heroes, okay? I really do not feel like identifying your parts. Do you hear me? Yes. The fuck?
We first see what we thought was silver tinsels, really just shimmery background decor for the brother-sisters documentary. We next see Dudenoff as a real person, and his advice is always keep shooting the camera. We next find out Glenn and Zach Galifianakis have been shot on the photo shoot set. We also see Bev Mellon was on the set and not shot, and the bullet hole looks identical to the one found in Charles's apartment. But during the chaos, where were Eva, Eugene, Tanya, and Marshall? We see Tanya is accounted for after the shot and is now in the lobby, but where was she during the shot? Detective Williams informs our crew Glenn is stable and the bullet ricocheted, hitting Zach non-fatally in the process. We also find out Dudenoff is not in Portugal. He's stateside cashing the social security checks at a bodega so as not to be identified by a bank. Also, Jan has been seen in the city. Detective Williams also gives Charles Saz's remains. Marshall gives Mabel the heads up about checking out the brother-sisters student film, which is about twin sisters killing for the creator and is filmed in Dudenoff's apartment. But how did Marshall know about the student film? During the film, we see Pink Eye Joe, aka Vince Fish, is an actor in their film. Also, is that Cinda Canning? No way, right? The crew visits Vince and asks him about the movie he was in. He says he knew the brother-sisters because Dudenoff used to be his and Rudy's film professor. We learned the brother-sisters were Dudenoff's favorite students and also they used to play Oh Hell with the Westies. We also see Rudy and Vince are able to pry the once-shut window open. Charles brings up that Dudenoff is back in town and Vince and Rudy act suspiciously dismissive at the thought of the idea. Gravy is now equipped with the doggy cam and knocks over Saz's remains. Good thing she did as we find out the remains include 2 left shoulder replacement joints. This now means there were 2 murders. Also, will Gravy's doggy cam come into play to help solve this case? We also find out Saz told Jan about another murder in the building, and this seems to be it. Also, this line is interesting.
We throw them off balance, so they just spill the tea everywhere in the rugs and places.
From Carpets USA offering me a promo code for a free rug pad.
We next find out the brother-sisters were in town the night Saz was shot, and they were trying to visit Dudenoff. Additionally, they were also in his apartment the night of the murder. Next, we find out the second left shoulder joint has been identified by the cops and belongs to Professor Dudenoff. Realizing he's dead, Tawny says it's been 3 years since either her or her sister have spoken to Professor Dudenoff. The crew also finds out the case the brother-sisters carry around has small cameras that they've hidden in everyone's apartments. Will these cameras come into play somehow? Also, who's been cashing Dudenoff's checks if he's been dead? Also,
Oh my God, that's it.
What do you got?
Doug. The guy who used to love Zabars. His name was Doug.
Is Doug important to this case?
Was it the guy who used to scream in the lobby about loving Zabars? I haven't seen him for ages. What was his name?
Triple also, who have the Westies been paying rent to this whole time? As the brother-sisters are removing cameras from Oliver's place, Oliver finds a camera that's not Tawny and Trina's. All of a sudden, Saz's phone sends text to our crew of videos of them implying the camera is theirs. The whole crew gets a text from Saz's phone saying, "I'm watching you," with eerily similar handwriting to the note found in season 1. How is Saz's phone still texting if it was supposed to be disabled?
What is key to note, Saz's phone has been turned off.
And how does whoever has Saz's phone have Oliver and Mabel's phone number? Also, if they've been watched by the killer, did the killer send this text as a joke on purpose?
No! Oh, great!
From Carpets USA offering me a promo code for a free rug pad.
Rise and shine!
I gotta sleep! I have a hangover! Shut the fuck up!
We see our crew fleeing the city and Oliver is breaking up with Loretta via text. Mabel has everyone turn off their cell phones in case they are tracked, and our crew heads over to Charles' sister Doreen's place. Doreen is weirdly obsessed with dolls and she seems to have the hots for Oliver. The crew settles in for the night and Charles tells a story about a childhood accident that happened with Doreen. Also, why does this doll look like Loretta? The next day, Charles is looking for a toolbox and Bev Mellon pops up and seems like she's looking for a place to bunker down too. Mabel is trying to find a workspace and Oliver is looking for some midday booze. Mabel sees Bev and determines Howard must have told her. Mabel tries to figure out what Bev is doing there and she says she's stressed and just trying to save the movie. Oliver finds the bar and Doreen tries to seduce him with vodka and Crystal Light. Also, the actors show up to Doreen's and want to hide out from the killer too. Oliver and Doreen get chummy over a few drinks and Doreen gets a little close. Doreen goes to answer the door and Oliver trips and falls on top of her just in time for Loretta to walk in and see them looking like they're having more than drinks. Loretta says Howard told her where Oliver was and she came from LA to talk about Oliver's breakup text. Oliver says he broke up with her after she didn't respond to his emotional speech and proposal. Loretta figures out her stand-in got the call and not her, and the couple has a laugh about the situation. Doreen and Charles have a brother-sister moment and she lets him know she's upset that Charles doesn't pay attention to her. The actors come in to check to see what Mabel is doing and Loretta comes in and recognizes Eugene Levy from a play they worked on together. Mabel asks Loretta if she can distract the actors so she can work on the case, but Loretta says Mabel should include the actors while she's working on the case. Bev comes in drunk and starts talking shit to all the actors and she says she's done with Hollywood. The actors profile her and Mabel gives them a chance to work on the case. Howard goes to the bodega the Dudenoff checks were cashed in, and with the help of his Animal Jobs podcast, he's able to finesse the owner into letting him see the check ledger. He notices the signatures in the ledger don't match and tries to call Mabel's phone, which is currently off. Mabel gives the actors all the details and the actors seem confident they can help crack the case. Oliver gets ambushed by Doreen in a wig and politely dismisses her advances so he can spend time with Loretta. Doreen is flustered after all the rejection in her life and tugs at Loretta's ponytail. She apologizes for her behavior and leaves. Loretta wants to know what Oliver said to the stand-in. Oliver admits to almost proposing when he was in LA and admits to making the fake Instagram account Ronnie to spy on Loretta. Loretta is overwhelmed by the weirdness and goes to be alone. Doreen comes to apologize formally to Loretta and they talk about Oliver. Loretta admits he might be crazy and Doreen says showing emotions is okay. Loretta tells Doreen to calm down and the two get in a throwdown tussle where Loretta ends up besting Doreen. Charles helps Doreen recover from the fight and Charles apologizes for hurting Doreen when they were little. They talk about their mom and the relationship they each had with her. Doreen admits that she wants the relationship with Charles that he has with his podcast crew. They make up and Bev walks in and says she called the studio and saved the movie. Loretta and Oliver talk before she leaves. Oliver admits he lost his cool trying to grow his relationship with Loretta. Loretta says she knows Oliver is crazy and proposes to Oliver with a doll bracelet as a ring. The next day, the actors wake up and tell our podcast crew they've cracked the case. They say the connections of Saz's murder go back to the first season when Winnie was poisoned. They say it wasn't Jan that wrote the note, and the note Oliver received was written by somebody who was left-handed. They also connect the note on Jan's door to the text message the crew received. The killer has been around since season 1, and Charles thinks that's what Saz discovered. He starts making sense of the notes left in Saz's apartment. Charles thinks this might have been the secret Saz wanted to tell him. Oliver then admits he's getting married. Doreen's husband Mike comes to bring some donuts to the crew and says Howard called him and told him to pass along some info. He says Howard told him he knows who killed Dudenoff and says all 5 Westies were taking turns cashing the checks. Howard also calls the number left on the ledger and Vince Fish answers. Howard ends the call and Vince tells the Westies they know.
You're gonna listen to our story. Okay, everyone on my team stay calm. Although killers do always tell you their story before they kill you.
We start off the episode with Professor Dudenoff narrating and describing Alfred Hitchcock's The Lifeboat. We see the Westies in the past gathering in the West Tower with an invite from the professor. And we finally see Helga. Dudenoff invites them in with an offer to change their lives. We see our podcast crew leaving Strong Island and heading back to the city, but along the way, Charles's car breaks down. While waiting for AAA, they run through the facts of the case they know so far. The actor group gives them a call and wants to meet up with the podcast crew, but knows the Arconia is not safe. They all end up meeting at the movie set and start to game plan how to get the Westies to tell their story. Eugene wants to use a game plan involving Tony Danza, and Eva thinks they should use a soap opera ding-dong method, bringing in a surprise guest to help interrogate them. Mabel decides they should invite the Westies over to play a big game of Oh Hell. Oliver gets a call from Loretta and tells everyone he's getting married during the upcoming weekend, and Eva shows Mabel her facial toner that also has a recording feature with auto-tune. Zach talks to Oliver about his upcoming wedding and suggests some colorful antics to add to the festivities. Eugene approaches Charles and wants to check to see if he's okay, and if he could see Charles in his full anger form. Charles doesn't want to go full Hulk mode yet and does his best to keep his cool. The podcast crew and the actors all gather composure prior to the Westies coming over to Oliver's. The Westies make it over for Oh Hell and bring a hamon as a game time snack. But then they go full villain mode and Rudy draws a knife and Anna takes their phones. Vince sits them down so the Westies can explain their backstory with Dudenoff. We see the Sauce family met Dudenoff at their restaurant and were the first to start playing Oh Hell with him. Rudy gives his story of meeting Dudenoff 8 years ago in his film class and goes into a full monologue from the movie A Few Good Men.
And this, what's this?
That is a ham radio.
Vince also gives his story of meeting Professor Dudenoff in his film class at a later time than Rudy. Vince and Dudenoff bond over their appreciation of films, and Vince is now added to the Oh Hell crew. Vince explains Dudenoff's wife used to rent the apartments on the floor as they became available, and would use them to teach music or allow struggling students to stay there. Instead of choosing to live alone on the floor, Dudenoff decides to allow his new friends to stay in the apartments. Vince says Dudenoff's dream was to move to Portugal, and he admits they've been cashing his checks and haven't seen the professor since he moved. Just as he's done, the crew gets a surprise ding-dong guest, and it's Helga. Helga tells her story of meeting Dudenoff as a locksmith. Dudenoff makes convo with Helga about the theme song to Perfect Strangers and says he always loses his keys. With his new lock installed, he decides to make the code Oh Hell. He then invites Helga to Oh Hell night. Helga later gets a goodbye note from Dudenoff saying he was moving to Portugal with a check dated 1/22/2021. Helga notices the lights go on and off and knows that the incinerator can cause this to happen. Helga says once Dudenoff left, the rest of the Westies started acting weird. Helga says she listens to the Only Murders podcast and hears about the weird things happening to the podcast crew and suspects the Westies may be involved. She thinks they had something to do with the power surge and Dudenoff's appearance, but has no proof. Mabel asks the Westies what they know about Dudenoff's metal joint, and they deny knowing anything. Charles finally has a non-verbal breakdown, and Vince takes the crew to his place to dig in further on Dudenoff's disappearance. He says the Westies all got an invite from Dudenoff except for Helga. We see the Westies all meeting Dudenoff in the basement, and he admits he has some medical news that says he only has a few months left to live. Dudenoff, on the brink of ODing on pills, instructs the Westies to burn his body and keep cashing his checks to make it look like he's still alive and to tell anyone else that he moved to Portugal. Before he passes, he wants to record one last film for Helga so he can say his piece to her. The Westies and Helga make up, and we find out Eva recorded the convo on her facial toner. Mabel then decides they won't use the recording to incriminate the Westies.
Why can't we ever get a ding-dong when we run out of leads?
Oh, a knock-knock ding-dong.
Helga stops by to say hi. She's reclaimed Hammy Faye from Howard and wants to tell the crew something about Saz. She says she met Saz through the ham radio and that Saz told her about a stuntman protege. Helga says Saz informed her that this person was harassing her and was dangerous and would be the death of her. The podcast crew looks up the movie Saz was talking about, only to find the stunt person working on the movie was Glenn Stubbins.
We need to find that stuntman.
If you do, get my shoes back for me, will you? He stole them right out of my trailer.
Do you remember his name?
Oh, I'll never forget him. Rex Bailey.
We start off the episode with a flashback to Saz getting a call for a gig and hitting a pedestrian. Saz is impressed with how they took the fall and invites them to be a stunt person. Our podcast crew goes to the hospital and tries to con their way into Glenn Stubbins' room to ask him some questions. The nurse ain't having their foolishness though, and they get booted to the waiting area. While waiting, Oliver gives Mabel the beer he was gifted from Saz, and the crew bumps into the bartender from Concussions. The bartender tells the crew that Saz's protege on Project Ronkonkoma wasn't Glenn, and he was another guy that he didn't know. He says the protege messed up real bad on the set, and the only people who know the whole story were Saz, the protege, and the director Ron Howard. We see another flashback of Saz preparing the mystery protege for his first fire stunt scene, and we see what is likely the source of the piece of silver tinsel we found earlier in the season. Back in the present, our crew adds more clues to their murder board and tries to figure out how to track down Ron Howard. Oliver says he knows Ron Howard and tells an elaborate and detailed story about their wild night at a Chinese restaurant. Oliver says he wants Charles to handle his bachelor party and has 3 requests.
Whiskey, A-list celebrities, naughty secret.
Got it. HELP.
Mabel decides to visit Bev Mellon to help her track down Ron Howard, but Bev thinks she's there to talk about the movie. Bev complains about the script, the cast, the crew, and the wardrobe, all while making a Red Bull and beef jerky shake. Mabel finally says she's there to find Ron Howard, and Bev gives her the address in exchange for helping her proofread Mabel's parts of the script. Mabel halfway agrees, and our crew goes down to the shooting set to find old Ron. After having trouble getting past security, our crew pretends they are extras to get inside the set. The crew is now on set, and Oliver is sure once Ron Howard sees him, he'll be recognized and they can get the info info they need. The crew then gets informed they have to act to keep their gigs as an extra for the day, and our crew is frantic. Oliver passes, Charles is given the job out of pity from being on Brazos, and Mabel also passes. Glenn awakens from his coma and falls in love with his nurse. She informs him the podcast crew came by to chat with him about Project Ronkonkoma, and Glenn says he needs to speak with them immediately. The nurse informs Glenn she'll contact him and also get his doctor. We flash back again and see Sass preparing her protege to be set ablaze. Back again in the present, Charles and Oliver get suited up in motion capture spandex, and Mabel gets a text that Glenn is up and she heads to the hospital. Oliver and Charles quickly get into an argument about the kind of bachelor party Charles had in mind for Oliver. We next see Glenn is awakened and is smothered by an unknown assailant. Back on set, Charles and Oliver have their big scene as extras. Oliver tries to go over the top so he can get Ron Howard's attention, and him and Charles get into another heated argument about the over-the-top requests Oliver has for his bachelor party. Ron Howard boots Oliver and Charles off the set and meets the rest of the extras. Mabel makes it to the hospital only to find out Glenn is now dead. We see an interesting news report on a missing person, and the nurse says when Glenn awoke, she only told Mabel and Glenn's emergency contact, Sass Pataki. She also says a man answered the phone. We flash back again and see the fire stunt from start to finish, and it looks like it goes good until something shocking happens off screen. Back on set, Charles opens up to Oliver that he's sad that he's a third wheel now that Oliver's getting married. He says he didn't want to do a big bachelor party, he just wanted to have a celebration drink with Oliver. Oliver suggests they get some food. They end up going to the restaurant that Oliver was talking about from earlier, and Oliver informs Charles he wants him to be his best man. Charles then orders some whiskey and moves Oliver's picture in the restaurant next to Ron Howard, thus completing two of Oliver's requests for his bachelor party. Right after this, Ron Howard enters the restaurant and recognizes Oliver from their night long ago. Mabel returns to the former Dudenoff apartment, and Marshall is waiting for her to try and get help to correct her lines in the script. Mabel says she's not in the mood to help and informs Marshall someone else has died. Marshall wants to capture what he just heard her say and begins to write. Back at the restaurant, Ron, Charles, and Oliver get into the story about what happened on Project Ronkonkoma. Ron says the stunt went good, but the stunt actor approached him and wasn't completely deflamed, and the stunt actor ended up causing Ron Howard's eyebrows to burn off. Mabel goes over the script with Marshall, and while grabbing a beer for both of them, finds something in the beer box. Charles and Oliver ask more about the stuntman, and Ron says the stunt guy stole his shoes. They also look strikingly similar to the ones Tawny Brothers had.
Do you remember his name?
Oh, I'll never forget him. Rex Bailey.
A name we've heard before.
This was the one where that shite fucker Rex Bailey got his heel blown off teaching Johnny Knoxville how to get fired out of a cannon.
Ron shows Charles and Oliver a photo of Rex, and they realize it's Marshall. We're shown all the flashbacks with Rex's face now visible, and we even see he's suspected of killing Glenn. Mabel sees what she found in the beer box is Saz's script for the Only Murders in the Building movie. Mabel asks Marshall why there's a script written by Saz, and Marshall sees Mabel's phone with a text from Charles saying Marshall is Saz's protege. We end the episode with an ominous look from Marshall.
I can't do it by myself. That's why I'm here. Now be honest. Are you on this ledge because I'm moving to New Zealand?
Our finale episode begins with a flashback on the set of Brazos, where we see Saz performing a stunt for Charles. While recovering, Saz gets inspired to try her hand at writing. We see her listening to the Only Murders podcast and typing her script, which turns out is the original version of the Only Murders in the Building movie. In the present, Charles and Oliver come to Charles's place and debrief about what they learned about Rex. They get a threatening text from Mabel's phone, but it's not from Mabel. The duo looks through the window to Mabel's apartment and sees she's being held hostage by Marshall. Mabel tries to escape, but Marshall stops her, and she realizes Marshall stole Saz's script and killed Saz. Marshall then admits to killing Saz and Glenn.
I hate that I accidentally shot Zach Galifianakis. He's so funny in The Hangover.
Mabel admits defeat but tries to buy time by helping Marshall finish the rewrites. Charles figures out that Marshall used the ledge to come to his place and clean up Saz's body. Oliver suggests they go on the ledge from Vince's apartment.
That is the first good pitch you've had since this whole thing started.
It took 4 seasons, but now I'm cooking with gas.
The duo bypasses Lester, and Oliver bumps into Loretta and has her go to his place to lay low. Charles and Oliver interrupt Vince and Rudy's workout, and Charles informs Vince he's going out of his window on the ledge to save Mabel next door. While Charles is on the ledge, he has a moment of panic, but Oliver comes to back him up. They figure out a good way to shimmy to Mabel's window and finally make it. As the duo makes it to the window, they realize someone else is ringing the doorbell to the apartment. We find Rudy and Vince distracting Marshall at the door, and Charles and Oliver sneak inside. Charles uses Eva Longoria's 19N1 facial toner as a weapon, and him and Oliver disarm Marshall. Charles asks why Marshall killed Saz, and Mabel tells him it's because Marshall stole the script from Saz. Marshall explains he tried to be a legit writer, but nothing he wrote made it big. He explains his dad was a hunter and taught him how to shoot, and he was very good at it. He explains that Saz had him read the original version of the Only Murders in the Building script. In a flashback, Marshall lies to Saz and informs her the script is no good and asks for a copy to go through it in more detail. He also says Marshall is a fake name.
Eventually I landed on Marshall P. Pope, which is awesome.
Is it though?
Sounds like a judge.
Rex says he stole the script and sent it to everyone and didn't expect it to get greenlit or fast-tracked. In a flashback, Saz invites Rex over to let him know that she found out he stole the script. Saz is deeply hurt and disappointed that Marshall would do such a thing.
Bev Mellon from Paramount? She bought our script.
This is not ours.
Saz said she wanted to get Charles's permission before shopping the script around. Saz lets Rex know she doesn't trust him anymore, and she says she's going to see Charles in the play the next day, and she's going to tell him what's going on afterwards. Rex is kicked out of Saz's, but remembers the details about the Dudenoff apartment in Saz's original draft, and he decides to take a red-eye flight to New York. He remembers the Dudenoff apartment code, sets up shop in the apartment, and waits for Saz. Rex has doubts he can take the shot, but snaps back to killer mode. He takes the shot and runs across the ledge to get rid of Saz's body. Once Rex is done with his story, he disarms Oliver and holds the trio at gunpoint. Suddenly, Rex is shot.
No fucking way.
The trio returns to Charles's apartment and the police are arresting Jan. Jan says she's been hiding in the secret tunnels waiting for the trio to find the killer so she could kill whoever it was.
I ate a bunch of your pirate booty when I was in hiding. I'll Venmo you $8.
Call it even for serial killing our serial killer.
Jan is taken away and the trio visit the movie set.
Little do they know, the bodies just keep on dropping.
Oh, there you go again, saying Loretta's gonna get murdered.
The trio catches up with the actors and Bev approaches Mabel about the meeting she set up for her podcast ideas. Mabel says she's not interested and is working on something about Saz. Charles then has a catch up with his imagined version of Saz and is finally able to take a compliment about himself from himself.
It's been a long day. Let him talk to himself.
We then see Oliver's wedding festivities and Loretta is escorted to the altar by Dickie and Will. The ceremony is gorgeous and proceeds without any hiccups or dead bodies. After the wedding, we see people dancing and having a good time, and Loretta and Oliver discuss their move to New Zealand. Mabel and Charles head up to Charles's apartment and bump into an inquisitive new character looking for them.
I want to hire you to find my husband. It's urgent. My husband is Nicky Cacciamilio, or was, if you believe the news.
We've heard this name before.
He has ties to the Caputo crime family. Officials say they do not suspect foul play at this time.
We only investigate murders in the building.
What happened to Nicky has everything to do with this building.
Mrs. Cacciamilio leaves her card with the duo in case they want to take up the case.
It's quite a dame. In the same way that Judi Dench is a dame.
Good save.
Oliver says his goodbyes to Loretta as she heads to New Zealand, and Charles wraps up the latest episode of the podcast with the trio. They walk around the courtyard and find Lester's dead body in the fountain, which is now bloodied. And now we have our next case to solve.